Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you to our returning attendees and to anyone that might have just joined us. Please make sure you visit our booths, our virtual booths for our sponsors. They can be found on the left-hand side of your screen under Expo. We also encourage you to use our event hashtag, so EC Conference 2022, and let everyone know you're attending. And just a reminder too, for our speakers and our sessions coming up, if you have any questions for our speakers, to add those questions to the Q&A box. For our next speaker, we have Govind Palanisamy, a senior solutions architect at Global Payments, who will be speaking on data loss protection and prevention. A bit about Govind: he has years of varied experience, including high-level leadership of security architecture, cloud security, solutions architecture, and data protection. He ensures comprehensive implementation of processes and policies to maximize production and streamline core operations. He has an innate ability to drive high-functioning teams in fast-paced and complex situations, along with effective and a proven track record of critical thinking, process improvement, and efficiencies. Please welcome Govind to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for Encryption Consulting for providing me an opportunity to present in the conference this year. And I'm going to talk about the cloud data loss prevention. That's actually the need of the hour for the industry. So let me start something simple, where everybody has to accept certain realities, what happens, and it's not it does not actually preclude idealism, but the acceptance of facts would actually take us to certain breakthroughs from a reality perspective. So we all have to understand it as well. One of the thing is people would say, hey, I'm 100% secure. No one is actually 100% secure or perfect in the world. Everything is not picture perfect as what ideally we want. We all have to accept the fact that the data breaches are happening everywhere, and we need to actually protect the data across various kind of losses as well. So we are going to cover few things as part of the session today. One, we would touch on the background of why we would actually need data loss prevention, and what's the main reason the data loss prevention is important, and then strategize it. Okay, what kind of strategies need to be applied in the enterprise or across the industry to make sure that data losses are protected, and we have necessary support from higher ups to bottom down to make sure the strategy is what will help us to drive delivering the capabilities. And then we are going to touch on the DLP layers, especially that would be focused more around the cloud side, what those different DLP layers are going to look like. And last but not the least, it's important for us to talk about the operating model, because without an operating model, the program or whatever the strategy we are actually trying to put together with different defense and depth DLP layers, it's not going to be successful. So those are the areas we are going to actually cover in our presentation today. Let me actually start with the problem statement. Data loss, and everybody will think okay, what's data loss? And as if many of you are aware that the data loss could be related to unintended movement of the information from one state to the other state, and that could be like due to certain unauthorized activity or unauthorized like disclosure of the information, kind of like breaking into your the confidentiality of it. And in some cases it's not just like confidentiality, it's all also about like the integrity of the data. The data integrity could be compromised, and which would lead us to some kind of data loss in some cases, where we are not able to like prove the integrity of the data. And in some cases due to like things like denial of service, where the the data is not accessible, and which would cause like some kind of like availability issues, or due to like something like ransomware, where you have the data available but it's not in a state like where you can actually use it. uh, and then if you look at like the potential for data loss is being increased, and it's another reason is due to the exponential like growth in the data creation and distribution across environments, and also due to the cloud migration and implementation, as like the teams like are planning to like optimize things, and like due to various integrations. And if you look at like overall industry, it's like a small world. And we look at like other businesses who are competitors, but we do like do businesses with such competitors in a direct or indirect way through some integrations, as like the industry grows together. And a lot of like data exchanges and data sharing happens within the industry as well. And other potentials like are the gaps in the data governance strategy and processes across the various industry, where the enterprises can have like the best in class like data protection strategy, uh, uh, data security principles, but they might be lacking a few things around the governance of the data, like from how it gets created, how it gets managed, sourced, and then like how it's get like processed and exchanged with various groups within the enterprise or with the industry like partners, etc. Let me start like with the four key things that how a data loss occurs. Think there is a malicious actor, and the malicious actor like predominantly like look for credentials to get like some kind of like financial benefit, and use those like credentials to gain access to the data in an authorized way. Uh, uh, so most of the activities happening in the industry is more like kind of like compromising the credentials, because the credentials are considered as a vital source to gain access to the data. And in an under the covers, where like they keep be, below the radar, where like it doesn't get detected, and then like they kind of like exfiltrate the data out as well. So that's why like the most of the data breaches occurs are more targeted on the credentials first. And the second most common factor that we are seeing in the industry is through phishing activities, social engineering, where like they kind of like gather the credentials to gain access to the system as well. And the third one is always it's very constant that like uh, the white hats or black hats in the world are this like identifying the vulnerabilities, and like uh, uh, those vulnerabilities gets like reported, and the malicious actor get access uh, to the information, and they create like exploits and like try to like look for such vulnerabilities available in the services that are exposed um, for various like customers and for various business functions. And in some cases like what happens is hacker, after they get like some sort of like credentials, they use those credentials against those vulnerabilities with a specific set of exploits to gain access to the data that what they're looking for from a financial benefit perspective. And then the motive behind them is to like cash out those data out as well. And then other kind of like activity what happens is like as we are actually like moving more kind of like digital assets, and the malicious actors, they also like look at doing some kind of like crypto mining across the environments, especially like the public cloud environment, where the crypto mining is one of the major activities that's happening as well. Those are the four different like areas which a malicious actor typically like target to gain access to the data. And if you look at like from a Verizon breach report, the actors, 80% of the actor is around external, and around 20% it's internal, and remaining portion are multiple different like actors in terms of a data breach. And if you look at the highest number of breaches that's happening, you see like either due to like web application hackings, or the availability of the data is impacted due to the DOS hacking, etc. And then like email and backdoors play a major role in terms of the data exfiltration, and the supply chain attacks that's happening also like causes one of the top action vector to cause this like data breach incidents. And if you look at like most of the malicious actors, they look either for credentials or for personal data. Previously, like the malicious actors were looking at like payment information, but the payment information like data breaches has kind of like declined, but it's still like happening now. They are more targeting towards around the digital assets such as like cryptocurrencies, and gaining access to those cryptocurrencies as well. And if you look at the breaches, right, like it takes like roughly like around 100 plus days to remediate some like vulnerabilities that's presented in the enterprise. Um and then the days to fix those vulnerabilities, it's being like extending to more than like 90 days. And um, based on like the research from IBM, uh, it takes like around like roughly around like 200 plus days to detect a data breach as well. And we'll be talking about the data loss like prevention strategy. Why do we need like the DLP strategy? It is to address like how we need to protect the sensitive data, and what are the threats related to the sensitive data that we when we expose them. uh, and because like if we do a like threat modeling exercise for the sensitive data, that would actually like help us to identify the threats that we need to address to protect our data from a data loss prevention perspective. And also like it helps us to reduce the financial impact and minimize the scope from a negative outcome perspective, such as like how do I actually like protect my brand reputation, how do I actually like um, securely like sell my services to customers, and how do we avoid like it's a risk mitigation like strategy. All those things like need to be looked upon when it comes to DLP. And from a scope perspective, like we need to like look at people, process, like technologies uh, as well. But let's start with the user, right? Like users now, like it's more hybrid, and like uh, we are living in a like digitally like transforming world, and where like most of the users are typically either remote or like work from office. And like we do also like have got like kind of like crowdsourcing as well. So which means like we do have like contractors, and they do have access to the data, which means like the data is in use on their systems. And some of them, we do also allow the users to access the information either from a company owned device or from a personal device, right? Where we call it as like bring your own device as well. And from a process perspective, like the data are created or sourced from different systems or accessed from like third party vendors for certain things, and it gets classified and it distributed and used, and it would have like its own like data lifecycle and data governance and policies around it, and there are some operational processes which need to be put in place to support how to like protect the data, and in case if some incidents are identified, how to tackle them as well. And when it comes to like physical or logical, the data is actually like stored at rest, and either it could be stored in a cloud storage or on-prem or in form or fashion as a database, etc. Or it could be a physical media or print or like on the screen, right? The data in motion, it could be like hosted on a SaaS platform where you retrieve it from a SaaS, or you actually like have apps stored, apps like hosted in the cloud where it need access to the data, read them, and then like the users exchange it through to a collaboration platform, etc. as well. And without strategic pillars, it's going to be very tough in terms of like having a strategy, right? So that's why we would start always with like defining the policies and standards, resources, and then categorize the risks based on like the data classification and define what risks it need to cover, and then identify what kind of like technical solutions need to be deployed to detect and discover uh, uh, the data usage. And then you also need to have a strong alignment with the data privacy and governance teams to make sure like, okay, what I need to protect, right? And how each classified data need to be protected, that comes from the data privacy and governance side of the world, and from information security partners too. And other key thing is like we need to have like a strong like DLP operations model with a strong response and compliance posture to maintain various like regulatory compliance requirements, various privacy like needs. And last but not the least, it's very important to educate the users and creating awareness about like how the data should be protected and what are the measures that we are actually like taking from an enterprise level, and how they can actually like help, because it is impossible to be successful without having users like help in terms of protecting the data and the interest of the company. And there are various DLP layers that we are going to touch about. When it comes to the cloud infrastructure, there are like various layers in there where you have DevSecOps uh, model, which is used like to help with your infrastructure as a code, where like they define like what level of access need to be like done, and like how they are using workload identities and other things, and then how the state file for the infrastructure as a code is protected as well. It's very important like to make sure like we have measures in place to protect any secrets, etc. when it comes to the DevSecOps. And on the host, if you're running like as IaaS VMs, you would need to have some kind of like agents to look at uh, the data loss. There are a lot of like DLP tools available which can actually like help you defining how the data is accessed, like exfiltrated out from those hosts, and how to protect them as well. And when it comes to the modern world as part of like the cloud, a lot of like companies are moving towards the cloud native functionalities, especially like developing microservices to run on the Kubernetes infrastructure or serverless. And when we talk about like infrastructure as a service or Kubernetes, there are a lot of like ways you can actually like protect the data. One, through the API gateway integration, where you could actually like monitor the flows And also like your container security software would help you like to create some set of like rules to see what needs to be protected and how a malware or a rogue containers is not introduced to your environment, which could exfiltrate the data, or like how do you do the namespace isolation, etc. And other, last but not the least, like the service mesh in the Kubernetes world is very like important, where it actually like helps you to meet your 12-factor app principles from an architecture standpoint, and it helps you to implement some like data loss prevention by adding like filters on some of the like the communication happens through the proxy layers, like such as envoy proxies, and they're very much customizable, and there are like well supported integrations available, as well as you can actually like introduce a zero trust principle for the service mesh, etc. And then when it comes to the network security, every companies would have like forward proxy to forward the traffic to the internet, etc. And then like you would have reverse proxies and web application firewall. They do play like a major role in protecting your data in your environment. And also like you do have like things like ICAP gateway, where you can actually like send the packets payloads to inspect and make sure like the data doesn't like get leaked, or you takes like some kind of like rules in place like to detect and respond to contain the incidents. And the observability and monitoring and the data governance are important in terms of like making sure uh, how the data is handled in motion, in use, and at rest, etc. And then like when it comes to the platform services, as like we are modernizing um, the application to more like cloud native, like everyone is using a lot of like cloud native like platform services. It could be a serverless architecture, or it could be like a cloud data services and utilizing cloud data storage. So for serverless, like API management and API integration and the data flow controls are very important, and there are some DLP integrations is possible with the serverless as well. And for the cloud data services, like to identify what data is actually like getting stored and how they are actually like stored at rest, and the interaction between the application APIs to the data layer, it need to go through some kind of abstraction where you can actually like put some controls in place to see what's allowed and what's not allowed. And also like the data discovery as periodic like scanning of the data through DLP solutions is important as well. And then like you can deploy like some service controls to make sure how the data is accessed across the environment. And similarly, like on the cloud storage, you can actually identify misconfigurations, everything through the cloud security posture management solutions, service controls, and data discovery using cloud provider solution or third-party solution as well. And when it comes to the SaaS, the CASB and content filtering plays like a major role in terms of like how the apps are accessed, like whether are you accessing a sanctioned app or unsanctioned app, and implement DLP from a access perspective. And also like the enterprise browser, it's a new concept that's coming up in the last like couple of months, maybe like 2 quarters. We have been hearing about the enterprise browser, where it would have a policy engine, and it helps to like enforce certain policies in terms of blocking or taking like a risk-based decision when it comes to the data. And then like there are managed endpoints where like you would use this enterprise browser with DLP tools, and also like bring your own device where you can actually like use this enterprise browsers to control what they can access from their own like device versus like a managed endpoint, etc. And then like we operating model is very important. um, it's important to make sure like we like the team who does the DLP program engages like various teams like architecture, business, data governance, data privacy office, various like DevSecOps team, engineering team, site reliability engineering, information security, security operations center, uh, to deliver like the requirements, what needs to be done from a DLP perspective, what are the policies and standards that need to be defined, and how the architecture need to be like designed and built, and who is going to deploy, enhance, maintain, and operate, like do the care and feed. And when it comes to validating the controls, it's important like for the compliance posture, etc. That's where the GRC would play a major role. And then like the infosec teams would create awareness to the users. And then we need to identify which business segments or these controls need to be operated and who is going to manage, and what's the value proposition as part of like this operating model would be like, what's my difference in depth strategy and how do I identify sensitive data. And as part of the program, these need to be all like operationalized. And how do I actually like maintain a sustainable and scalable environment without impacting any of the performance criteria as well. And then the cost structure depends on like the capex for like the commercial off the shelf tools, and opex for like cloud infrastructure and platform services or SaaS subscription. And even like if you're offering this as a service to your customers, you could actually like generate some revenues, and even it could be looked upon in the enterprise as not as just a cost center, but also as a revenue generating center, um, to provide services and to offer secure products. And from a DLP resources perspective, there should be a cross-functional team that need to like make sure they are more like focused around the solution. And then like initially, like you could have like some kind of like third party who can provide the support, and later like over the period of time as you mature, the external resources can be scaled back. And it's always like recommended to have a like a dedicated cross-functional team with clear like roles and responsibilities like laid out about the technology deployment and maintenance, and how the processes need to be addressed from a compliance and governance perspective. If anyone has got questions, you can find me in LinkedIn as well. Thanks again to Encryption Consulting for your time. Um, have a great day, everyone, and hope you enjoy the conference.
Perfect. Thanks, Govind. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having
How
me present it in the
um,
conference.
our pleasure. I do have a few questions here just that have come from your presentation.
Sure.
What are the key things I need to consider for implementing cloud DLP?
Okay, the key things that the teams need to look at is like what kind of data they need to actually like protect, and it depends on the overall like the solution, because like one size like does not fit all. It depends on like case by case basis. Where if you go with a like a IaaS pattern of your like application deployment, or if you use like secure like confidential computing, right? Like the control or the solution like would differ from each of it, right? The team, like if they are planning to implement it, like they have to look at what patterns the team is implementing, or what kind of like services they are using in the cloud. Is it going to be IaaS based or PaaS based, or are they looking to use something like wholly like serverless completely, right?
Right.
That's something has to be reviewed. And other aspect of it is the data flows, right? Like, okay, what the integration points are, and which system is actually like exchanging the data, who at the end of the day controls the ownership of the data as well. Like we need to look at, uh, because if we have some weak chain in the link, right, that could be a vulnerable point that could be utilized by somebody to exfiltrate the data out easily, right? So we have to look at like end to end on the data flows, and it depends on the overall solution.
Okay, thank you, Govind. So end-to-end management.
Hmm.
How can I determine the data risk appetite of the business?
It actually like depends on the overall uh, business perspective. If you look at, there may be a company like who would be dealing with something like healthcare information, but if that data like gets out in the wild, right, they will be like paying some, they will be penalized, right? If the company
Right.
net worth is like say 1 million, but if they are getting a penalty of more than like what they could like chew, right? Which means it's outside their appetite. And also the other aspect like they have to look at is, okay, when we implement a control, okay, is it actually like worth the money like what I'm actually like spending? Is the cost for the control is more than the worth of the data, right? Like
Right.
those things has to be looked up, and it differs from business to business, and also like it depends on how well the brand of that particular like entity is being like in the market, right? If
Right.
you take a like a big brands like who are in the top notch like uh, the Neiman Marcus, Target, like Walmart, or like in the other industries like medical industries uh, like Pfizer, etc. Like it depends on where they fit in the market, and also like what their appetite and also like what's their net share worth value. It
Right.
various factor. It's more towards the business side, and uh, the architects and the technical people like has to actually like identify, hey, what would be the overall like the TCO for a solution to protect it end to end, and they have to give that like to the business people to say, hey, this is what like it actually like takes to protect X amount of like business data with Y amount of like technical solution controls and processes around. And at the end of the day, the finance and risk team like take a call. Okay, is it actually like worth spending this? And the leadership like looks at, hey, I'm okay to actually like willing to accept the risk, and they take the call. And in some cases, if they are unable to determine it, and that's where in a big enterprise it goes to like the board and they go for board
Right.
approval, etc. Right? So,
So really determining the value of the data and the risk you'd incur
yep,
if it wasn't. Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
right.
Um, who are the stakeholders that need to be engaged in supporting the cloud DLP program?
It should be actually like a top-down approach from business leaders, like the technology, like CIO organization, uh, and the teams like who are supporting those technology like leaders, like uh, from starting from like the left side, right? Like architecture teams, the engineering teams, the SRE teams, and the operational support teams need to be heavily engaged. But at the end of mainly like we need to partner with business. That's a critical piece. Like not many of the technical team members like they think, hey, business is second. Like we have to like protect, like do this thing, right? But without like understanding what business impact it could create and the customer experiences, all those things need to be looked upon too. So
Okay, thanks, Govind.
welcome.
I have another question here. What are the responsibilities of legal and procurement teams while procuring third-party SaaS services and to support the cloud DLP programs?
Okay, especially like when it comes to the legal and procurement, they have to look up what like kind of like SaaS terms uh, they are providing, and also like are they clearly like articulating that who is going to own the responsibility of the data and securing the data? Because in most of the cases, like if you look at a responsibility matrix, 90% of the time the SaaS providers will not like clearly articulate what they are responsible for when it comes to the data. Some say, take for example Salesforce, right? Salesforce say like, hey, we recommend using like shield encryption to protect your data, and it's at the end of the day, it's customer responsibility to enable it. Where like there are providers who provide like tools and technologies to give in the hands of customers, and at the end of the day, it's a customer choice, right? And also when it comes to the SaaS side of it, how you're actually like integrating with other services from SaaS platform to exchange some data, that has to be clearly like reviewed by legal on what those terms are and who will be responsible for it.
Okay. Thank you so much. You know what? That's all the questions that we have. Is there anything that you want to highlight about your presentation, just to really summarize it before we leave you, Govind?
Oh, one of the thing I would actually like highly recommend teams is to like shift towards the left side, like closer to the applications where it's actually like processing the data and exchanging it out with other systems, like the ingress, egress, and the processing side. Like I would highly recommend teams to focus on when they're reviewing the architecture side and implementation, etc.
All right. Thank you so much, Govind. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you being here live with us today and for your presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
And everyone, I just want to